Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources, hashtag how I got custody. This is a reminder that the real battle is more what happens outside the court than inside the court. Yeah, you want to go for full custody, or, everybody should be going for full custody. That's what the other side does. Why don't you do it? I say shoot for the stars and hopefully you hit the moon. Your attorney wants to shoot for the clouds and you're going to hit a tree branch. The other side's going for full custody and saying you're a monster. If you say, I want 50-50, you're showing or demonstrating or testifying that the other side's wonderful. So if the other side's wonderful and they're calling you a monster, you're saying this person is credible, the court's going to believe him. So, but you want to go for everything. And I started off my court battle and I won over and over in court. I mentioned in the last video, after my custody battle, about a year later, I went to court to modify child support because I had 2 jobs. I lost one of them, found out what the mother was making, and a bunch of other reasons why I tried to modify. That brought in her new second and really crazy attorney who's more psycho than any attorney I've ever dealt with. Everybody says their attorney's the worst ever. It's just your personal experience. I've seen thousands of attorneys, and there's nobody that's been worse than this dude. There's a couple people who have tied, but nobody worse than this. But so in that second wave, the first court action lasted 7 months. This one was a year and a half. And I had to fight and fight. And then I wore them down because they didn't want to go to trial. They wanted to try and abuse the system to get me to surrender. It was all a game. So the warfare outside of court and me not surrendering and me wearing them down and it costing them thousands of dollars and just fighting, they eventually were throwing in the towel and they didn't want to go to trial. So, there's a period of time I had an attorney because I thought I was going to go to trial. I didn't realize this is 2004. I didn't realize that, I could really do a trial on my own. So I had an attorney, but I did all the paperwork. I prepped him. I told him what to say. So he was just like my little tool or weapon or whatever. But in any case, it was me making the calls and calling the shots and stuff. But I had to be willing to combat everything that they said and everything they did and just stay on the offensive. And we had a second guardian ad litem. Then we're going through the guardian ad litem and fight the guardian ad litem's stupid recommendations and stuff. And we schooled them over and over in court. But eventually the mother wore down, and then she was struggling with her visitation and things like that because it was dragging out. Because they thought they would bully me into signing off on their deal for a few months. So and like I mentioned in my last video, you get up close to mediation or to the end of the case, and usually guys give in and quit, and they look at mediation. They say, oh my God, I just want this thing to be over with. And they say, sign here or else we'll take you to trial. Or they're really pushy about signing now, and so is everybody else. I had a guy who went to mediation. I said, dude, don't sign or surrender on anything less than 50-50. He called me like within an hour after getting out of mediation, crying, saying, I signed away, I'm on 4 hours of visits, and then I'll get overnights in like a year and a half. I'm like, what are you doing? And he gave the mother sole decision making on, I can't remember if it was all of it or if it was at least school. Might have been school and daycare, and they had joint on medical or something. But the next 5 years, he's been in and out of court fighting on decisions that he didn't want her to make and things like that. Because I was like, why did you sign off on that? We talked about that. You didn't want to settle on anything less than 50-50. I told you not to do it. And don't give in. He said it was just real hot and sweaty in there, and my attorney and the mediator and the mom were all saying I better settle. My attorney says he's going to quit if he doesn't settle. Well, if he's going to quit on you, then tell him to quit then. He's admitting he's selling out and he wasn't there for you. He's admitting that he's a total sellout and you're wasting your money. And so instead of him toughing it out, and she didn't want to go to trial, there's actually another case. She was an immigrant and she tried to sue him in federal court for a whole bunch of stuff. And in that case in federal court, he was scared and he fought and fought and fought, and they played chicken all the way up to trial, and they dropped the case. If he would have had that fight originally, he wouldn't have been stuck with her totally in control and her totally screwing him over. If somebody wants to push to settle at mediation with a bunch of threats or else and this and that, they're probably bluffing because they don't want to go to trial. If the mother's in total control and you got every other weekend or supervised visitation, only a few hours here and there, she doesn't have to settle on anything. So she's pushing you to settle, but she's in total control. She doesn't want to go to trial. She doesn't want to answer your discovery. It's the warfare in these games outside of court. But if you don't get on the offensive and at least try and go for full custody and call her out for the monster that she is and ask for a psyche eval on her and anger management assessment or a drug test. These guys, they're dealing with a baby's mom who has prescriptions and been diagnosed with a mental disorder. And every state, the court has to consider under the law, a factor is the parent's mental health. And in every state, you got to consider if there's drug problems. And your baby's mom has a drug problem or she mixes pills with alcohol and you don't even bring it up in court? Why would you not do that? In my original custody battle, I swear, even though I won in court several times, fought off bogus restraining order attempts. After I got zero visitation, I appealed from a commissioner to a judge called a motion for revision in Washington, and I got 5 days a week. Now that's the same courthouse, two totally different judicial officers, and an entirely polar opposite ruling: zero visitation to 5 days a week. I know people who their attorney said you shouldn't do a revision; it won't do anything, and I won a revision. And then I got the mother found in contempt. The first contempt, actually, she scheduled, the day I scheduled my contempt hearing, she scheduled an unnecessary surgery for my daughter. And so I had to push the contempt out. And it took me a few months or a couple months to get a hearing and do it right and redo it because I didn't know what I was doing. Like I said before, my custody battle had been over way much faster. And then I got her found in contempt. And then I was doing discovery. But the thing was, my point with all this, even though I won all these hearings, it wasn't me winning as much as it was because me picking up the child from daycare while she's at work, that didn't affect her at all. It was her having to go to court and stand up there and be embarrassed in front of everybody and have to give an answer as to why she's accused of being a alienator, a manipulator, mentally ill, or in a cult of her and her sisters, an anti-father cult where my child, I told the court it's like a cultish environment. Like we hate the father and this is toxic, environment that they're in. Control freaks or reputation protectors don't want to stand up in front of a court with an audience all around watching you get accused of this stuff. Of course, those narcissists, they don't mind doing it to you, but when they have to feel the heat, then they lose their mind. So it was that warfare of wearing her down and her thinking, I got to go to trial with this guy in 6 months. And, I got my family tugging at me and I'm in a tug of war between my family and James and they hate him and I can't act like I like him and, all this other stuff or be cool with him. That'll look bad or whatever. And there's just a bunch. And if that side of the family is on her case and I'm on her case, it's just a mental, psychological warfare that wore her down. And you guys are on the other end of the warfare and you're letting it get to you and you're not doing any pushback and you're giving in to everything. It's a game. It's a war of attrition. Sun Tzu's The Art of War. It's a war of attrition. It's more the game outside of court. That's all the more reason why guys should get on the offensive and not stop and use every tool and weapon available. If you're just sitting there idle while she's in total control, she's in total control and she's got the leverage. Get on the offensive. Go to war.